look, a bug. But enough about that, which is a theme that will come up again actually in this game, the Riftbreaker. Or is it just Riftbreaker? I've already forgotten. It's that knows the name of the game commentary with your host, Offie D, where we're going to look at the most important or interesting moments in the campaign of the Riftbreaker/Riftbreaker. Let's call it the Riftbreaker. I think it is the Riftbreaker. So what is the Riftbreaker? It's a Factorio-like, you could say. That's probably the fastest way to describe it. It's Factorio with less of a focus on making a big machine and more of a focus on tower defense. So the two elements of that game, but reprioritized. We're here, somewhere, mining some stuff from a service deposit of metal, and if you've played Factorio, you'll immediately see these similarities. The game actually starts a little bit in media res because you're supposed to play a prologue, which is effectively the tutorial, that I didn't do. However, I had actually played it once before in years past, I forget when exactly, because I played this game on my nephew's Xbox one time and played the prologue, so that's how I knew about it. What we're going to be doing is basically the Factorio thing, where we're going to mine a whole bunch of resources with the objective of making some kind of ultimate construction project that will need high tier materials, and you work your way up the tiers. Here I am slapping down some mines on the thing that will give you the materials automatically. However, where it then differs from Factorio is that you don't have to do anything with the materials to use them. So in something like Factorio, the materials, when mined, would be physically at the mine, and you'd do something to move them to where you want to use them. Here, materials are sent into your inventory, which is in the top right. Although this is inconsistent throughout the game, like what materials are considered inventorizable. For example, you do have to connect power, as you just saw there, to get something to work, so you can't transmit power or electricity through this teleportation system you seem to have. You also can't transmit liquids for some reason. Well, maybe we'll see some of that later. So there's a little bit still of the logistical side of things, but it's significantly less important. It's just not about that anymore. But you could say, like, if it's truly trying to be a simplified version of Factorio, having to build electrical cables, I guess is a waste of time because there's no strategy involved in it. You can just cable up anything whenever you want. You have to defend them. I guess maybe that's part of the challenge, but in my experience they were never attacked, so it was fine. I just wired up the whole base sort of normally. I don't know. It doesn't matter. As you can see, we have to fight some things. So again, if you've played Factorio, you'll recognize this part of the game. This is much more of a big deal in Riftbreaker. They attack you a lot more, there's a lot more of them, and a lot more of the game is based around combat. You can make loads of different towers, tons of equipment, and fighting yourself is much more heavily prioritized. So we'll be seeing plenty of battles throughout this footage, no doubt. For now, well, I've made this little corner of wall that's fending off the enemy who are attacking from a certain direction there. Basically all we're doing at first is mining the two main resources that you use for everything, and they are called carbonium and ironium. That was the first of my two immediate problems. I like to point out some sort of immediate problem I had with the game at the start of my commentaries. And there's two, one that matters and one that doesn't. Let's focus first on the one that doesn't matter because I don't like you. It's the fact that the two resources were called carbonium and ironium. Because, you know what guys, carbon and iron aren't copyrighted names. You don't have to think of a different way of putting it or anything like that. You could just say carbon and iron, and I think the game would be 0.001% easier to play because people know what iron and carbon are. And I'm pretty sure these things are iron and carbon based on what they look like anyway. You might also be saying, can you mine carbon? Aren't they actually talking about coal or something like that? Well, probably. So there you go, there's a pointless problem. Here's the real problem that affects the entire game in my experience. What you're seeing here is the most zoomed out the camera can be. And obviously this is one of these things where, like, in the first frame, you immediately begin scrolling backwards because, like, nope, too close, too close. And that never stops being a problem. It becomes a bigger problem really overall because the base you're building, the machine you're building is always bigger than what you can see. And it's always helpful to be able to see more of it, but you can't. As I understand it, you can do some shenanigans, like you can edit the game files to make it so that it lets you zoom out more. It's possible they're limiting the zoom here because of performance concerns. I'm not quite sure, but I'm guessing this. based on a different post that the developers made, where they were talking about making a multiplayer version of the game, but they were struggling because it was annihilating the performance. So performance concerns must exist, and perhaps for that reason they've kept the camera locked close to the ground, because like maybe this needs to work on the previous generation Xbox or the PS4 or something, so they want to keep parity on PC by locking the camera here. And well, it was a problem throughout. That's probably the biggest problem with the entire game that I had. Like, it's a pretty fun game overall, spoilers, I enjoyed playing it, but the entire time I was having less fun because of the zoom level. Like, it just has to be said. It's just one of those things. It's actually my favourite kind of thing to point out. One of these things where if they could just change this one thing, the game would like be an extra point on the out of 10 score better. Those kind of changes are always really interesting to me. Well, anyway, so we're going to very closely look at me building my base, and you can use the minimap in the bottom right to see what's coming of all of these close-up shots overall once it all connects together. Your ultimate goal is to build some sort of thing, but to get there you have to tech up, and as you upgrade your base to get higher tech levels, more and more stuff comes to kill you, and that's what we're preparing for right here. It's telling me we're going to be attacked because I upgraded my HQ, which you need to do to unlock various buildings in the game. And you can see the greater emphasis on fighting yourself, as well as building towers and walls. You can build platforms to shoot over the walls, or just go out yourself and fight, and later on you'll get tons of personal combat abilities, and this becomes much more like a sort of shmup tower defense hybrid game, with this base building element tacked on that is just less important than in other similar games like this, such as Factorio. With the main difference just being the logistical differences. All of the actual stuff you do is the same. You just don't do the part where you have to figure out how to move things between buildings. That's the part which is like the big-brained part of Factorio, so you can easily see somebody not liking this game because it doesn't have that. For me, I didn't mind so much because, in my experience, I didn't really like the belting stuff in Factorio. Because what I found was, you kind of think you found a good way to do things, and then later you realise, oh, I needed to leave like this much space in my base to get it to work efficiently, and you kind of think, oh, I should just start again now that I know what products you need later in the game and what early base build things will turn out to be useful later. That just kind of annoyed me for some reason, usually because I'm the kind of guy who can't be bothered to start a game again once something goes wrong, so I just sit there with it being wrong and me being mad about it the whole time. That kind of experience. Which was resolved for me in Dyson Sphere Program, which is more similar to Factorio, a game I've also covered on this channel, simply because in that game you could build in 3 dimensions, which meant you're much more able to just do whatever you want. So you can essentially make a really inefficient belt layout and it doesn't matter very much, whereas in Factorio your belt layout might actually restrict you from being able to make things with any sort of efficiency. Whereas if you can just build up instead of sideways, you can do all kinds of things. I seem to recall in Dyson Sphere Program, for no reason I was building belts that just went up to the maximum build height and then came back down again. For my own personal amusement, I guess, I liked having pointless 3D structures making my base look weird like that. Anyway, so in the Riftbreaker, once again let's talk about the game that is on the screen. You don't have to do any of that. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. I did miss it a little bit, but because the game has lots of other stuff to be focused on, it didn't really impact my enjoyment of the game, or like I wasn't thinking about it throughout the game or anything like that, in the way that I was thinking about the camera being too close to the ground. I've got 2 last rant points before we move on. The first is a real point. Let's make the real point first this time. The game is based around managing scarce resources, so that's more like what you'd be thinking about. Instead of how am I going to move this stuff, it's more like how am I going to get more of this stuff, because there's only a certain amount of each resource, like in your starting base here for example, and it's nowhere near the amount you're going to need. So there are various ways in which you're going to have to make other bases, expand your operations, and try to get more resources. And the more you do this, the more the enemy will attack you. So you want to do this efficiently if you can, so you can keep it all under control. But there are various exploit tier game design aspects that make this much easier than it sounds, and in practice, you end up not having to worry about the resources so much. It's only really for me, like in the beginning, when I didn't really know where the game was going with this, I was like, I've only got a finite amount of this carbonium stuff, whatever that's supposed to be, and you have to spend it both to produce power, because I'm using it for power generation, but you don't have to do that. But more importantly, you have to use it to repair the walls when they're damaged, and they will be, because the enemies infinitely attack you, they infinitely spawn over time. And you have to use both carbon and ionium to make ammunition for your towers. They don't have unlimited ammo, so you use resources to defend your base. This means there is a quote-unquote global time limit on the game, or at least there is at first. You will fail eventually if you don't succeed in time. You can't just hold out in your base and take your time to a massive extent. It's just that in practice this doesn't come into things because you will end up having loads of time. And later in the game it is possible to convert electricity into resources using some tech. And theoretically you can get massive amounts of electricity by like covering the entire map in wind farms or something. And you'll see that because you have access to more than one base, you can kind of stow a pocket base somewhere else that's just generating stuff for you, and resources don't become a concern. But early on, I guess that was my concern. That's the only point to make. I was like, uh-oh, I'm going to run out of resources. If you saw my video on Dawn of Man, where I was like having a breakdown over the idea that our flint mines will run out of flint, similar sort of thing here, but it turns out it doesn't matter. And it wasn't worrying me so much, I guess, because again, there's just other stuff to do. So here's the pointless point I promised to make. The other thing that concerns me about the Riftbreaker is that in this game that is called the Riftbreaker, you don't break any rifts. Do you know what you do, crowd laughter? You make rifts. The final objective of the game is to make a quote-unquote rift, which is like a teleportation gate, and you'll see that you can put them down all over your base for local teleportation. It is perhaps the in-universe tech that explains your ability to instantly use resources from places where they are produced, because teleportation is just a casual thing in this universe, and it's done through rifts, and the rifts are used by you making the rifts. Why isn't it called the Rift Maker? I rest my case. 0 out of 10. Here's a look at the tech tree, or one of the tech trees. There are billions of techs across 3 pages. A lot of them are essentially rehashes of the earlier ones, so there's a set amount of stuff to research, and then you get the level 2, level 3 version of them later on. But a couple of them are also unique things you can only get later on, and some are upgrades, like this one I have selected here, which are like tech levels, where once you get them, more techs are permissible to be researched. You get research points by having research buildings that generates them over time, and in the bottom right you can see how long it's going to take to research each thing. A long time really, but it ends up sort of passing quite quickly because you're essentially researching things constantly in the background while you're doing something else. So what I tended to do is set up a massive research chain, forget about it, and then come back like an hour later with tons of stuff unlocked and wonder what I could do with that stuff. So that ended up being quite nice. There's just something happening in the background, like you're always achieving something no matter what you're actually doing. You achieve part of the game by just allowing time to pass, and in fact many of the things you need to complete the game will be achieved by just waiting for something to happen. So that's good, isn't it? What am I doing while waiting? I am making a rift, and it's thoroughly unbroken, I assure you. We use these 2 local teleports. I'm going to teleport up towards the top of my new base area. You can see in the top left of this full map where I'm supposed to be going. We have to go and find something that's up there, some cobalt. And this is the full scale of the map. You might think at first, like, is it going to be some sort of Minecraft infinite world? It is just a square area, and there's an invisible wall around the edge. What you can't do is wall off the edge, because the enemies spawn on the edges. There's like a no-build zone towards the edge, so you can't completely secure the square that you are in. You always have to be attacked from the sides and leave the edges open. Anyway, as I go towards the objective in a miraculous twist, we're going to have to fight a bunch of stuff. A lot of the enemies in the game are weak and strong against various things, and there is an in-game research system for finding out what's weak against what. I never looked at it because I'm too big-brained. Well, no, it's actually because you can tell pretty quickly what is effective against different kinds of enemies, so I didn't really need to look them up in the codex. I noticed that in the achievement menu, for some reason, the achievement for reading the codex for every enemy was really, like, common. So people were using that system. I never even opened it in any of my footage, so I can't show it to you, whatever I'm talking about there. Here was me wondering, how do I get my health back? Like, I lost some health in that fight there. You can use a healing item that regenerates in your inventory, or you can just die, and this is the thing that I'm discovering here for the first time. dying doesn't matter very much. Like, you have a health bar, you can die, but you just respawn instantly. And the punishment it gives you is you drop a weapon. And that's not a very big deal. Like, a weapon, you can just craft them in the pause menu at any time. It costs like a couple of hundred resources, and we've got like tens of thousands, so it's all fine. You can imagine them being a bit more punishing with this if, say, it took like 10 seconds to respawn instead. Because if you died while your base was under attack, like, you'd be waiting for that nervous 10 seconds to see how much damage the enemy did before you can intervene once again, something like that. There is a mode when you start up the game called something like hardcore mode, and it gives you a warning if you try to select it, saying you should only select this if you really know what you're doing, and I believe what that does is enable permadeath, so if you die you have to start the game again. So that's a little bit more hardcore. Feels like there should be something in between, that's what I'm saying. Here's another random discovery along similar lines. There are certain lumps in the environment that invite you to press space on them. If you do, a timer starts ticking down and a bunch of enemies spawn around you and kill you. The idea, I think, is that you would press or unpress space so that you stop the timer going down, fight the enemies, then go back and keep bringing the timer down to unlock a reward. And I guess I just didn't get that at first. Well, I died, and it doesn't matter, so that's the good news. I also put a rift part way to where I was just then, so I don't have to walk all the way back. This is a nice thing about the rifts that you make. They don't require power, or you could say that they get power wirelessly through their rifting abilities in such a way that it's a slight incongruity, because why can't other buildings also get power in the same way? You know what? It doesn't matter, but I'm still mad anyway. Now here's something that could potentially matter and potentially cause madness. I don't think it did, but it's worth mentioning. As I was going to my objective there, I'm suddenly not doing it because, well, the base is under attack and I came back to help out with that. And I sensed this possible issue that could come up in this game where you're trying to do something, but because the game is operating on this cycle of interruptions, you could say, it could get annoying to be stopped in your tracks. And I think it's only really because I'm new to the game that I don't feel that this is the case, but I'm detecting here the risk that a veteran player would be like, right, I'll go and do this thing, and then it's like, oh, there's an attack coming in 30 seconds, I guess I'll go and wait for that to show up, and like, I'll do it. And it might be tedious because it's a repeating cycle. If you play the game a lot, this will have happened to you a gajillion times, and you'll be utterly confident that you will win. So like, actually doing it might feel like a waste of time. And you might be thinking, like, well, I just came here to try out this build, or try out this thing, or do this cool strategy or speed run, but I still have to do the infinitely respawning enemy attacks thing, and that's kind of annoying. Well, here's something that's not kind of annoying. Look how easy it is to repair your base. I was delighted by this. You can just mass repair entire areas real fast. It doesn't like do them one at a time, and the big thing it doesn't make you do is remember what your base was like before it was damaged. You could imagine, in a terrible parallel universe, if something was destroyed, when you give the repair order, it would repair the still standing elements and then not rebuild the stuff that was completely removed. And you just have to remember it and put it back manually. I'm essentially having this nightmare about this parallel universe because there are probably other games that were like this, and I was getting annoyed about not remembering where I'd put stuff before and having to put it back. In this game, it's not like that. It's very quick and easy, ultra streamlined, ultra UX friendly, all very good. And now, well, it's another distraction, so this point comes up once again. I started going to the objective, then it tells me I have to go and fight this alien nest. This is another infinitely respawning task that just keeps happening. And it's something where you could just ignore it, but the voiceover and the game alerts keep telling you to do it if you don't do anything about it, and it's just sort of annoying. I suspect that if I'd played the game enough, I would be really against having this in the game, and my complaint rant here would be, this is trivially easy, and you can't stop it from happening. It's this infinitely respawning chore, this task, that's not worth doing. And it's sort of ruining the game because it's what I sometimes call a pace breaker. They should have called this game the pace breaker, because there's always something stopping you in your tracks. Like, you're on the mental road of thinking, I'm doing this or that objective, and then you stop because it's like, oh, now I have to spend a few minutes doing some other, like, randomly spawning objective before I go back to what I was doing before. And it just gets you out of the groove, out of the zone, and makes doing the main thing less fun as a result, because it had that break in the middle. Well, here's me actually doing the main thing. That risk I'm talking about here, by the way, is very hypothetical. I wanted to clarify that I didn't really think this was the case in the Riftbreaker. I found everything compelling to the extent that I was never thinking, damn, I'm so annoyed, it's telling me to do this new thing all of a sudden. But I sense the risk is there, so that's all I'm really saying about that. Perhaps if I was a veteran Riftbreaker player, I would be really annoyed about that. That's what I'm worried about. Anyway, what am I doing here? Time to fight off another invasion, and the thing I wanted to mini-rant about at this stage is a complimentary rant. About, well, not necessarily this game, but its formula. So I guess, yes, this game, because it's using its own formula, isn't it? The idea that we have this genre of game, the Factorio-like, as I was vaguely putting it, I don't really know what it's called, like a base builder game which has this gameplay loop that is about having a never-ending stream of quite tractable problems. Maybe that's how I can put it. So problems that will always come up, but you always have something you can do to solve them and improve them. And, well, perhaps the cherry on top is that how you solve them is left up to you to some extent. So if you watched my recent video on Mech Engineer, where I was ranting about like the difference between real hand holding and just like claiming the game doesn't hold your hand because it doesn't tell you the controls or something like that. Here's a game which is ultra user-friendly, massive UX, tells you everything all the time, but this really doesn't hold your hand because it's giving you an infinite series of problems where you decide how to solve them, and the tractability comes from the fact you have so many options for how to solve them, and I guess the forgiving nature of the game means that many of them are ultimately going to be the correct option. There probably is a best way to solve every problem, but you have enough space and leniency that you can just sort of solve them in the way that you think is most fun to you, similar to Dyson Sphere Program, and something I would say is a little bit different to Factorio itself, where it's a bit more strict about having to actually get it right to have a long-term advantage. I like this kind of game, basically, that's what I'm saying. The never-ending stream of solvable problems that keeps you doing something. It's very engaging to me. There's always something to think about, and even when like there's no immediate problem, like you're not under attack, you can still be thinking about doing things because you can always be expanding your base, you could always be claiming new territory or building towards getting new resources, and those are solving long-term problems like in tandem with the short-term problem, such as this one here. Somebody's attacking this little outpost I made over here. Annoying because the enemy big spawns that come in these waves don't go to a specific place, so you do have to kind of guess where they're going to show up. I don't believe they just attack like the nearest thing you've built to their spawn. So the fact I've built this random teleporter near the objective so I could go back there sometime means that that's now like my base from the AI's point of view, so it's mainly attacking that little square of stuff, and we have nothing there obviously. Luckily I can go and kill the enemies myself, but that's just a little thing to keep in mind. You could imagine a potentially more tower defense-y version of this idea, where it tells you like the enemy's route, like they're going to a specific place on the map, and you could specifically defend for that wave in a specific way. It's more like you work out the place the enemy will always attack based on the direction they're coming from and build all of your defenses there. So it's kind of exploitable in practice. It actually reminds me, the idea I just said, of X-Morph, if anyone knows what that game is, which is an actual tower defense-y game that I'm pretty confident, if I remember correctly, is by the same developer. It's the game they made before this one, and it's kind of similar to this in its UI design and UX. And I thought, when I played that game ages ago, I was like, this game has good UX, so maybe whoever they've got working for them likes making neat sci-fi UIs and stuff and being generally user-friendly. That's good. Well, it looks like we won this battle anyway, and I was distracted and I forgot what I was ranting about, which is perhaps a nice meta point for this potential idea that the game is distracting you from what you were trying to do. But in practice, there are so many different things to do, so many different problems to solve all the time, and you always have things you can do to solve them, and even if you do quite badly, there are always ways to get out of those problems. Like, this is a game that's probably not going to have soft fail states, and leaves open a lot of creativity for the player for how they solve all of their problems. It's just fun. I don't know, it's like the anti-anxiety mechanical setup where, like, if anxiety is being confronted with problems you can't solve over and over again and building the stress because of it, then this is the opposite. Millions of problems that are both easy to solve, and pretty much every way you can think of solving them is going to be a way of solving it. It's not like, you know, this is a trauma to me when you're in school maths class and you come up with a solution to something, but it's not the solution, it's not what they wanted for, and therefore it's wrong because it takes longer or you had to do more writing or something. And you kind of think, well, you're saying it's quote-unquote wrong, but I still actually did it. Here's an example of a game where obviously I am playing this wrong. Like, what was I doing just there, making that massive corridor of energy storage? That's going to be really annoying in the future if I ever want to walk horizontally through that area. But I was just doing it because I want to, I guess. I'm just following my heart, and it's all working out. I'm essentially praising the game for being easy. I think that's what I'm saying here. It gives you the illusion that you are constantly achieving things, even though if you're achieving them really badly, it probably should be like, hey, you're achieving things badly and punish you more for it. But it doesn't. I don't know, and I appreciate it not doing that, even though I just said that it should. We're back at it again with the objective versus subjective game design. I like what was happening with this genre of game, and particularly how this game does it. Let's just ignore the fact it could be better in some ways and plow on, because, as I said, my experience with all this was that it was very immersive. Like, when I was playing the Riftbreaker, I was constantly thinking of new things to do and constantly doing them. Up to a point. Later in this commentary, I will come back and reverse this point and complain about the game being too boring, in case you are looking forward to some complaints, so they will be coming later. But for now, we're still in the magic period, when I was compelled to keep doing everything that the game has to offer. Right now I've discovered you can set up this ammo storage system, which allows you to build up a reserve of ammo for your towers, because they are basically running out of ammo when the enemy attack, so they stop attacking mid-enemy wave. That's inconvenient. Also, you might have seen that I was running out of ammo. Your mech has finite ammo, and you have to make ammo using this armory building, which is somewhere in the middle of our base, and it gradually respawns in your inventory. That building also makes the tower ammunition, but now we've unlocked the ability to make separate tower ammo factories, so we can have them on separate lines, making it better for everybody to be holding the trigger down all the time. And that sounds like a good time, doesn't it? Here I am, defiantly not doing the objective. We need to research a certain thing, and I was like, well, while that gradually happens in the background, I'll go and build stuff on the map and have my own fun. This proved to be a bad call, because the thing I'm researching, alien research, unlocks a building that makes you research everything faster. So you should do this as early as possible, as it turns out. So for me, I just sat around, well, doing this. This I think is what I was getting at before, where it's kind of nice that you can just do what you want. Like, I've decided to start making a fort here in this corner because there are some resources. I ended up joining this part to the other fort I'd made nearby, if you saw that. Doesn't really matter. We also fought millions of aliens. Here I am setting absolutely everything on fire with reckless abandon. And this begins to tie in to something that occasionally comes up in the game. The game actually having a sort of fake ecological theme. We'll see more of that later, I expect. Eventually, I did research the thing. This unlocks the third tech tree with millions of question marks on it. This tech tree is a bit different, in that you have to actually do research on things to unlock potential techs for that tree. And by do research, I mean you sort of scan animals or scan plants to get information on them. And with that you can unlock certain techs, but I, in practice, didn't get very many of them, so I don't really know what most of them are. Some of them are mandatory though. Perhaps we'll see. Doesn't matter very much. Again, speaking of, doesn't matter very much, I died. Now I can just instantly teleport back to where I died, and it's a lot like I didn't die, although I dropped a weapon. But yes, you can pause and make a new weapon, so that also doesn't matter in practice. The issue is I was fighting a boss there. That's another constantly spawning thing that can happen. Bosses can appear on the map. I think with the bosses, if you completely ignore them, they might leave you alone, but if you sort of walk near them, they aggro and then tons of stuff starts attacking you, so that was the problem there. We defeated them. Here's me finding a sort of glitch, I guess. To make the alien research lab it wanted me to build, you have to also supply it with water. And one of the objectives to getting that water was make a liquid pump. Here I am making a liquid pump, completing the objective that does not connect the liquid to the research lab. This is because, as I might have mentioned earlier, liquids don't teleport around in the way that solids do, so you actually have to put down pipes, and you do the logistics stuff from a Factorio like in this instance. In my case, I had used the water coming out of a geothermal vent to supply the water to the lab, which doesn't count as completing the supply the water objective enough. So there's some sort of minor problem there, doesn't really matter. Once you've got the lab, you can make this scanning building, which allows you to teleport to other places on the planet. And the game turned out to be a lot more about this than I expected. At first I was like, well hang on, this is potentially worrying. It's making me go to a new map which generates using similar rules to the original map, so it's got all of the same sort of terrain considerations. There are resources to find, choke points to defend. You can do all the same stuff. You have the full building options. And I thought, wait a second, is it doing the old secretly make you start the game again thing, where it makes you build a second settlement in city builder logic and you just sort of go through the process again? Well, not really. It's not really asking you to do anything, and I was just sort of overestimating the importance of these sections. This is hard to explain because it relates to a really vague criticism I have of the game, which is that the game, I eventually realised, is structured in such a way that a lot of the maps you can go to are just there to facilitate quests. They're not really part of the building part of the game. I'll try to explain that. Here's me getting absolutely annihilated as I once again try to scan one of these things. One day, I'll probably learn that what you can do is set up defences around the thing, then scan it so the aliens can't just sort of pile on top of you. Instead, we just get into this fight, and one thing I wanted to note is that by now I had discovered one secret to the combat in this game, which makes it way easier, is that area of effect weapons are very overpowered for the simple reason that they don't affect you. So you can fire a rocket launcher at your own feet, that's absolutely fine. So you're fine to consider rocket launchers and grenades and stuff to be melee weapons. You are immune to that damage. And we'll see the full use of that fact later as it becomes more and more ridiculous. It looks like after a while of wandering around, I actually started building a base here, and you're not really, quote-unquote, supposed to. It's just that you can. Like, the whole rules of the game operate the same when you're on these quests. You could start playing the game from here and make this the place you're building your settlement, but you're not really supposed to, and I don't know. I think there's a sort of communication issue, or at least I had one, in that I was building around this place, but it turns out the only reason it sent me to this new map in a new biome was to walk around. The quest was to just unveil a certain amount of the map, and then it says, well, that'll do. Because you've done that, we've discovered another map you can go to, and that's where the resources are. So like the goal of you globe-trotting is to find the resources you need to progress the game in your main base. So you unlock new places to go, but if you try to go there, it threatens you, saying, well, if you leave this map, it will go away forever, and the base you built here will be deleted, which just seemed like a strange twist to me. What you can do is make an outpost. This converts the map into more of an ordinary map, in that it's considered to be part of your base, and the map won't be deleted if you leave. You can come back whenever you like, and most importantly, the resources you generate will go into your inventory like back on the other map. So what you can do there is do your resourcing on a different map to the main map you're standing on, like your headquarters map, which is significant because the maps that you build bases on and then leave will just sort of last forever. They're never attacked. The enemy, the aliens, only attack where you are. So there's some logic in getting all of your resources from maps that aren't loaded. They'll then just passively provide you with those resources without being destroyed, allowing you to dedicate all of the power and space in your main base to defences to make it as secure as possible. You may be able to avoid having to make resourcing outposts in the way that I was, which was confusing my defences by splitting my base between different parts of the map. Things like that. So there is something you can do with this, and you are actually, as it turns out, as I learned a bit later than this, intended to do it in certain places. Because certain resources are only on certain maps, you have to make resourcing bases on some of them. It's just that, and this is the sort of pointless, difficult to describe criticism that I have, on maps where it's basically just a quest and you're not intended to actually make a resourcing base there, such as this one, where I have to scan 5 things, I think to unlock the ability to build on quicksand or something. Various techs are locked behind scanning things, and this is one where the game actually tells you to go out and get it because you need it. These kinds of maps, because they are generated in the same way as the other maps, it kind of creates a slight dissonance. I feel like the maps that are quests should be different in some way. It shouldn't be a randomly generated square with all the resources and all of the stuff, and I'm not saying that for any particular reason other than that it's messy. That's how I wanted to put it. We've got a messy game design where the parts of the game that are effectively missions or quests are structured and presented like the parts of the game that aren't, that are the open-ended sandbox building parts. And it's kind of good that it's like that, because it allows you to use the stuff from the sandbox building parts to do the quests. Like, you could fortify areas and make hideouts on these quest maps while you do them. They'll be deleted later and the entire map will disappear. That's a shame, I guess, but I guess what I was thinking is that maybe these parts of the game that are effectively just quests or missions should be on handcrafted or different maps, just maps that are generated using different rules, where it's more of a challenge and it focuses more on doing the quest. And I don't know, this is where the confusing, messy part of what I don't like about it comes in, and indeed it's bleeding into the messiness of this commentary. There's some comment where this should have been different somehow, because the developer intention for these maps is different, but it's not sort of communicated through the map design or what you're expected to do very much. It's just that you'll do a quest and then it'll say, that'll do, now leave, and it's sort of a surprise, like, oh, you generated what is effectively the entire game from my perspective so far. Like, I've seen one map, I'm like, this is the entire game. It generates a second map, I'm like, oh, here's the entire game again, but you're only supposed to go in there for 5 minutes and then leave, and it deletes that entire game for you. Of course, you can make the outpost, as I said. The reason why you might not want to make an outpost and thus have a map be deleted from your list of options to go to is the game claims that you can only make so many outposts, so you have to pick which maps you want to keep around for some reason. I don't know why your navigation computer never lets you go back here if you leave. It just is like that for some reason. That's another messy aspect of this multi-map system. And yes, it was saying you have to make an outpost, but don't make them if you don't really need it, because you can only make a certain amount. Later in the game, I discovered that certain amount is like 10, and I'm not sure there are even 10 places you can go on the planet. So all of these concerns essentially were alleviated by the fact that it doesn't matter, which makes me think it shouldn't have been like this in the first place. Essentially what I'm saying is you can simplify it a little bit by removing the requirement for outposts and just letting all of the things stay in the list all the time. But also, I'd rather it differentiate between the maps, which are maps that contain vital resources, where you have to make a resourcing base, and maps that are just sort of nothingy maps like this one. You can wander around on them. There are some resources. You could make a base here and get the resources if you want, and if you are playing truly optimally, maybe you should. But you weren't really expected to. You weren't expected to make use of this gigantic map or really think about its layout or do much with it. It's just a quest. I'm just supposed to be walking into the corner of this map for all intents and purposes, and having it take place in an environment where it's like the environment where the rules were different, where I was supposed to be doing something else, makes you feel like you're playing it wrong somehow to just be doing the quest objective. Well, again, I don't know what I'm talking about. There's some sort of problem here. It's really hard to describe. Some sort of thing where it's a little bit uncomfortable, I guess, or messy, as I was saying, to have it work like this. I think I'll just drop this point now, because we've gone so far into the weeds that I'm doing the meta thing again, where if you don't understand what I'm talking about, that's the weird feeling of discomfort and misunderstanding that you get from being on a map that sort of looks like you should be playing the game differently, but you shouldn't be. Package up your frustration at my commentary, and that itself is then the comment. Another geniusly delivered point with more real words like geniusly being deployed to aid this point. So here's what I was actually supposed to be doing on this map, fighting two bosses in the corner. It's easy enough because by now I've unlocked the decoy ability. You can see there the boss is fighting a ghost thing you can leave behind, a hologram rather than a ghost, I suppose. And well, this is just an overpowered ability because it just aggroes everything, and then you sit in the corner shooting rockets into the affair, and the rocket launcher can charge up multiple rockets as we see here, like in Unreal Tournament, and then fire lots at the same time, so we kick off this next boss fight against the other one with tons of damage, and already we've basically won, and it's wasting its time fighting the quote-unquote ghost. So there is something to be said for the difficulty in this game, that thing being that there isn't any of it. I already mentioned how there's no consequence to dying. Even if you have no base in a region, if you die in it, you just respawn and start the quote-unquote quest again, but you keep all of your progress, so you just walk back to where the thing that killed you was and then keep fighting it. So while the game is more about combat, the combat's pretty easy, and we'll talk more about it again in a second. I did say there is a mode where you're not allowed to die, which makes it harder, but that's pretty plausible to me that you could not die playing the entire campaign. I feel like after the first couple of times I died, I never died. Obviously I can't prove that because I could be dying constantly in between all of these shots and there would be no visible consequences of it, which is again a point on the difficulty. Here's a nice point. Upgrading your walls is really satisfying. Upgrading buildings is so easy and smooth. You sort of paint the upgrades onto your base and just make it all happen instantly. It's really fun to unlock a new tech level of something and then go around painting it over your buildings to just suddenly become more powerful. Ultra user-friendly and ultra fun. I enjoyed that. Perhaps less fun is what's happening here. We have to now go and fight some more nests. This time there are 3 nests and they're about as far away from my base as they can be while still being on the map, so annoyingly I have to go on a bit of a walk to find them. And again, I could ignore them, it's just they keep attacking you if you leave them there. The attacks don't really matter, but they do constantly have like voiceover effects and lines and alert messages coming up, which just gets annoying having them constantly going off. So for that reason I did that. Here's me doing an objective in a quest I abandoned earlier to get some cobalt. Now this is one of these maps where it takes you there and you are expected to build a full base here. This is where the map design is now more in line with what you're expected to do, because you're looking at the map layout and being like, well, I could put a wall here between these mountains and things, and trying to make the minimum wall length to cut off the maximum amount of map area to control. And it makes more sense for all of the map stuff and the resources to be here on maps where you are here to take those resources and to defend a base, not to go sit in the corner or do something. But you could also build a base and defend it if you want, and it's like, well, why are you even letting me do that? Again, I would criticize it if it didn't let you do it. I'm criticizing it because it does. There's a lot of mess there, and I said I'd stop talking about it, so never mind. What I tried to do was defend the corner of the map, but I discovered the thing I mentioned before, where you're not allowed to build at the very edges of the map. So you have to leave these edges exposed to attack, and the enemy can just spawn like right on the edge of the invisible wall area and immediately be effectively inside your base if you build at the very edge of the map, as I'm doing. So this isn't a very good place to put a base. I thought it would be genius. No, it's the worst possible place. You still have to defend all 4 sides of the base, so you might as well put it in the middle so the enemy take longer to get to you, and there's more space to put more defenses and minefields and such. Instead, we'll just do this. I'm going to make this big rectangular base because it covers a whole bunch of cobalt, one of the resources you need to tech up in the game and unlock various things. I'm not really going to talk about the economy because you have so much freedom to constantly mine resources everywhere that I never really had economic problems. Maybe I'll mention them now and again, but essentially, we'll mine all this cobalt. It just happens automatically in the background and there's not much to say about it, but this is the objective of the game. It will just be happening passively. It's more about setting up a base that will mine the cobalt. And this is where perhaps the Factorio element is lacking, because all you do is put a mine on top of it and it's teleporting into my inventory from anywhere on the map. And then, well, I could do what I've done here. I could wall off the mines and put guns here and stuff and like fight the alien waves that constantly attack. But if I just left, the aliens wouldn't attack this area, and that would be the end of that. I could just teleport in, put down the mines, and leave. I'm pretty sure that would be fine. So I'm really just amusing myself by fighting these aliens, and there were 2 topics I wanted to discuss vaguely related to this. First is that while the game has a lot of combat, one problem is that there's not necessarily any point in engaging with the combat. Like, well, as I was just saying, it might be better to teleport around and not bother defending these bases and just skip the combat encounters, because you don't quote-unquote get anything for doing them. So when the enemy attack you, they can drop resources in very small quantities, and they will occasionally drop weapon mods, which I ended up with like so many of them I couldn't even use them. There isn't any particular thing to progress in the game that is done by fighting the aliens, but fighting the aliens is itself quite a lot of the game, so there's a potential issue there. To some extent, that's just something you have to come to realize. Like in that footage where I was ranting earlier, you saw me walking around the desert, fighting loads of aliens, for no reason. Like, that wasn't doing anything. I should have just run past all of them and just gone to the objective. It's really just that they're in the way, and so if you don't kill them, something bad might happen, and it's a similar thing with the waves that attack you. There's no reward for beating them other than that you don't get the punishment for not beating them, so it's just maintaining the status quo. But because that constitutes a lot of the game and a lot of what you're doing in the game is specifically for combat, like if I didn't have to build all of these defenses in my base, I probably wouldn't be building much base at all, because I don't really need most of this base. I'm just kind of securing map area so I can generate a whole bunch of power inside its walls. and I need that power to power the AI cores you use to unlock more towers, and I need the towers to fight the things. But fighting the things isn't necessarily a fun in-game objective, it's just what you have to do to keep the game going. And it makes me think maybe there should be some purpose to fighting. So, for example, you can see on the minimap there are loads of enemies right outside my base. Could there be some purpose to me going out and fighting them because I would get something, like you level something up or get experience or something like that? I feel that something has to be done in that regard because so much of the game is about fighting. Or is it? That's the counterpoint to what I'm talking about. Like, you're not really, quote unquote, supposed to be fighting the aliens, and this leads into my next point actually, which is a vague point for which there is no footage and nothing to prove on screen, like all of my favourite points. This game has a very vague ecological theme, where sometimes the main character will protest things like building or just blowing stuff up because they want to preserve the ecosystem of the planet. The thing is, this sort of invites this ludonarrative dissonance of such a massive proportion that maybe it actually matters to point out a ludonarrative dissonance for once. You are not here to preserve this planet. Your in-game objective is to build this teleport gate because that will allow Earth to move here. I think in the game's lore, Earth is in terrible condition. We've come to this planet to try and make a new planet for humanity to move onto. Our goal is to destroy everything here and pave it over, and indeed in the game that's precisely what you're doing. I actually haven't paved the ground. What you're supposed to do is put down these massive metal plates. These give you some bonuses, I think, like you move faster and maybe something else as well, and then you build on top of those metal plates. You can just build on the mud and don't take the bonuses, and it makes your base feel a bit more ecological. But still, it's difficult to talk about ecology when I'm setting half the biomass on the planet on fire on any given day of the week. And as you can see here, the collateral damage is extreme. It's like, oh no, like the weird rhino things are trying to get back into their territory. Right, send an artillery bombardment into the rainforest, put down a gravity mine, fire flamethrowers, destroy absolutely all life in a 100-mile radius so that they can't go back into our territory. Because it's my territory now. And while I'm not showing this whatsoever, there are various bits of dialogue throughout the game from start to end where the player character protests and it's like, well, we don't want to experiment on these animals to like learn the secrets of this planet because that would disrupt the ecosystem. Instead, I'm going to take my 6-barreled rocket launcher, fire it into this rainforest, and then sort of rifle through the corpses to get animal research. And it's like, well, okay then. It feels like the main character should just be like, we're doing this for the good of humanity. Sorry, other planet, you just lost. Turns out we're stronger. We're the ones that invented rocket launchers before you, and we showed up. That's the end game for this planet, because that is actually what you're doing in the game. I think it shouldn't pretend at all to be sort of greenwashing, you could say, the fact that maybe we're not completely ruining this place by nuking it into oblivion constantly. After a while, I decided to go and do the objective. I wanted to add that the fact I wasn't doing the objective and was just sort of hanging about killing stuff is perhaps indication that maybe there is some purpose to fighting things. It's just for your own amusement. Well, anyway, here I am, looking for stuff. It's another map where you're just here to do a quest, and I eventually realised the game is repeating this pattern, where first it makes you go to a map to look for evidence of some material you need. But then that material will always actually be on a different map. And it's inviting the suggestion that you could quite easily refactor this a bit by just combining the look for something map and the harvesting stuff map together, and this would slightly reduce that weird, messy incongruity I was referring to earlier. As we can see here on this map, we have to fight another boss, but it's extra easy because I've now unlocked this turret that freezes enemies and makes them move in ultra slow motion, and I can even put down many of them. So I'm just sort of standing here. The boss is very slowly walking towards me, but we've got plenty of time to kill it off, and the turrets will kill it off on their own, in fact. So yes, the combat remains pretty easy. The king of easy difficulty is back at it again, although it's normal difficulty this time. I could make it harder, but then again, it's fun to easily kill these things, and because there's no point in fighting, quote-unquote, making it hard is just wasting your own time really, because you're not going to make any more progress for making the game harder in this way. It's more about the resource management. we find some of the resources we need here. You might think all of that green stuff was supposed to be the uranium. That's actually a different radioactive material. The uranium is a different green thing to find that's more square than pointy. We find some in the ground, and then it's going to say, well, now that we know what uranium is, we can build a scanner to look for it, and then eventually you'll be given the chance to go to a different map that actually has uranium on it. And it just sort of leaves you here to be like, well, you can leave if you want. And there is some purpose to this sort of post-mission part of these pointless maps, because you can still wander around and look for these lumps, the lumps that spawn enemies when you touch them. Because if you defeat all the enemies and then touch the lump again, it drops a unique tech or a unique upgrade, which I didn't realize at first, but essentially there is a hidden fourth tech tree that is based around these lumps you find in the environment. And the more of them you find, the more extra special techs you get. They tend to be special moves or weapons or things like that. So I think the turret that shoots ice is one such example of a thing that drops from fighting enemies. So there is an example where combat has a purpose. Well, the combat element of it doesn't have a purpose, it's just to get the reward from touching the thing. So that's more purposeful. Doing these fights is more worth it, I think. It's also more fun just because they're a bit harder. It spawns absolutely tons of stuff. Although we are again just exploiting the fact we have all of these abilities which can aggro the enemy or allow us to dodge attacks and allow us to shoot millions of rockets at the same time. We've got plenty of stuff in our arsenal. And there is a bit of a bullet hell aspect as well, as you might be noting. There's just stuff shooting at you everywhere, and if you keep juking around, you'll probably not take that much damage. This is fun. Has anyone suggested that yet in the game design backseating conference? Maybe the point of the combat is that it could just be something to do for fun. That's still not quite satisfying enough to me. You can say, well, it's just a fun thing, but then I'll be like, well, that qualifies as a mini-game then. It's not integrated into the game itself because you never have to do it. And indeed, this secret fourth tech tree I'm talking about unlocks things you don't need. You're so powerful, you don't need extra abilities, and you can only equip a couple of abilities, so unlocking more and more doesn't necessarily help. And I'm pretty sure the loadout I have here I just used for the entire campaign because it was working so well. So yes, I could go around these maps looking for more of these things. And I remember at least once I had a session that I didn't film, where I did walk around all of one of the maps and collect all of them. But I almost certainly didn't use what I picked up, so I guess it was a quote-unquote waste of time, but then I did do it voluntarily, so maybe I was having some of this so-called fun along the way. Perhaps if that fun was more in line with the general progression of the game and what you're quote-unquote supposed to be doing, that would be a better game design in some fashion. Another comment in the, well, it's okay, but it could have been a bit better in some abstract way vein, which is my overall take on the Riftbreaker, it seems. Here are the various things you can craft whenever you want, I've referenced a couple of times, and at this stage I discovered, wait a second, I'm allowed to craft nuclear missiles from my inventory. And you don't even have to use the uranium, they're just made out of iron and carbon, iron and coal effectively. We've somehow made nukes out of it, so that went well. So I thought, fine, I'll just equip a nuclear missile, that sounds handy. And yes, it is handy, I ended up using this for the rest of the game. It's essentially a slower firing, wider area of effect version of the rocket launcher, but it's just more fun to be well, challenging that ecological theme I mentioned before as well, where it's yes, we're here to colonize the planet on the one hand, but I want to preserve nature on the other hand. By the way, I just fired 10 nuclear missiles into a herd of local animals. I hope that's all fine. The good news is that these nuclear missiles aren't radioactive, they don't cause any fallout, and I say that because radiation is actually a mechanic in the game where you take damage if you're near radioactive rocks. And your nuclear missiles don't appear to leave any fallout that damages you or something. That could be a thing they could have done, but they didn't. It's just a different kind of rocket launcher that's more memey, so I'm going to use it the whole time. Here I am back at base, having to deal with the fact I've put these resourcing bases on the edge of the map, so now they're not ideally placed to defend against waves coming from that direction since there's not much space between the base and the edge of the map. And it means I have to spread my turrets across a wider area of base, these turrets would be better served defending the main base, so if the enemy could only attack the main base, that would be more efficient, wouldn't it? Well anyway, what was I even doing back at the main base fighting the enemy? I didn't need to be doing that at all. Here's what I'm supposed to be doing, teleporting to the map that was unlocked on that other map to look for uranium. So yes, if this actually was the original map where we discovered uranium, and then the uranium spawns on the map, there would be fewer maps you have to deal with, and it would make more sense for it to be spawning a full, buildable map with all of the terrain and resource considerations just for a quest, if that quest eventually turned into, and now you build here, like now it does matter that you bothered to explore the map and things like that. And then ideally, if you still want to have these areas where you can just walk around and look for enemies to kill, look for those things to collect the abilities, and generally mooch about getting rare resources by killing boss enemies, those would be their own kind of map that doesn't despawn from the menu or anything like that. You could just be like, go out into the wilderness and it will just spawn a random map for you to walk around on and look for things, and then you go back to the official maps to continue building your base in a separate loop of the game. And it's kind of like that already, it's just not quite, and that's the messiness I kept referring to. Looks like as I was paving over this area of base, some local rocks that turned out to actually be alive got mad. What did I do? I fired many nuclear missiles at them, and the problem went away. And that's going to be pretty much the story of the rest of the combat in the Riftbreaker, as we'll see. There's one other thing to mention actually before I move on, which is I wanted to say, this is a game where you're doing the thing where you make your quote-unquote town many times, as I might have mentioned already. And in the past, I've always complained of being like, when I was playing Anno 1800, for example, like you make one town, and then it's like, well, to get all the resources you need to complete the game, you have to make other towns, and then it's like, now you have to build on another map, and you have to make like 6 other towns. And I always think, I kind of prefer to have my headspace be in one town, and have it be all based around just leveling up a single location and building more and more of it, rather than essentially starting again in a new location and like dealing with the low end of the tech tree and doing the basic stuff again, because I don't find that as interesting, and I got really mad playing Against the Storm, which is a game all about just doing the basics over and over again. So in the Riftbreaker, my comment on it was that it didn't have this negative effect, because while you are expected over the course of the game to make like at least 5 different bases, and the bases need to be strong enough to withstand attack, because at least while you're there building them, they might be attacked, so you sort of have to set up something in case the attack comes in while you happen to be there trying to do something. Even though it's repetitive and stuff, I liked doing it. Probably because of how absolutely smooth it is to build everything. Building stuff is really fast and fun. You're just like spitting out walls, you're just like securing choke points in like 2-second build sessions. I don't know, your building feels like a really powerful mechanic in some way. And it's just really well implemented, like ultra UXy, really smooth, a zero jank building experience where everything quote unquote just worked. And perhaps because of that, I didn't get mad at the fact I had to build many of the same base effectively over and over again in different places, and I didn't feel like I would rather be at home like just making the headquarters bigger and bigger instead of making more base infrastructure on new maps. It didn't have that effect. I'm going to cite the game just being generally well made as the reason for that, and of course, the combat and base building both being quote unquote fun. I don't know why I keep mentioning fun in this game design commentary. There's some sort of aspect of this game which relies upon the crutch of making the game fun, and that's just unfair. I came here to make some really annoying game design arguments of some kind, pointing at various minute issues, but the problem is, the game is fun, even with whatever these things are that I consider issues, and because of that I didn't really consider them issues while playing. There was one issue that I thought was real while playing, which still hasn't come up yet, so we'll get to that later, but in terms of me actually playing the game, I was having this so-called fun, and I thought the game was so-called good as a result, even if I've come here explicitly to find things to complain about for my own amusement. I'm pretty sure my complaints do actually hold some water, but while I was playing, as you can probably tell from the footage, I'm just like, yeah, this is fun. I'm just going to build like 25 solar panels here, just for my own amusement. Like, there are many ways I could choose to power my base. I'm going to choose this one. And it was just fun to do it. And there I am, glitching out crazily. That happened a few times throughout the game. The mouse, in some way, messes up sometimes if you put it over yourself because your character is trying to turn to face the mouse. Does that matter? No, but at least we found something bad to say to dilute slightly this praise of the game. I mentioned in a recent video that, theoretically on YouTube, complaining about games is more popular and more fun than saying that games are good. I like sometimes to say that games are good anyway, but also I agree that complaining about things is more fun, and I'm of the mindset that it's absolutely fine to complain until the end of time about things you actually think are good, because that's how you make a good world great. It's how you make the world even better. Until everything's perfect, until I am a god, I will continue complaining, and of course those two criteria will probably happen simultaneously because they are dependent upon each other. Praise Devin. And now let's see what Devin from tomorrow has to say about the Riftbreaker. It's Devin from several days in the future actually, and I'm not even going to look at what I was talking about last time. I know it was something stupid. Let's just move on. I eventually built this big base you can see on the mini-map that covers one edge of the map. It's making uranium. It both mines uranium and then makes a refined version. That's the one you need for doing the final objective, essentially. So we're now doing the thing. I just had to wait for it to be done. I could proactively make more refineries and more mines to speed it up, but there was other stuff to do while we waited. Such as this. This happened a couple of times in the game and, well, it just sucks. There's this event where randomly there can be a meteor shower on your base, and it just blows stuff up all over the place and you have to walk around putting it back. Now, because of how smooth the game is, going around repairing everything's quite easy, but this sort of highlights how it shouldn't really be a challenge at all. Like, why is this even happening? It's not necessarily hard to put your base back because you just click on it and it comes back. But because the game has decided to start removing my base, I have to do this now, and it's just like a random chore. It would probably be better to not have that particular random event occur. The main actual thing it can do is destroy a power line somewhere, so that might have a long-lasting effect, especially if you never find where it is and forget or something. But the game does tell you when you're lacking power, so it's pretty hard to forget, even for me. In fact, there's an example of it right there. Those turrets on the left were cut off by that meteor shower. Had to click on a few things to get it up and running again. Overall, that was annoying. It happened a few times. And right after, there was also a random nest spawn. So now I have to go out into the middle of nowhere and fight a nest. Otherwise, the game will complain the whole time that I'm letting the enemy spawn and come at me. Easy enough to do, but as was ranted about previously, it's kind of pointless feeling. It's tangential to what you're doing in the game. It's just stuff that's designed to interrupt you from playing the game, so the game doesn't feel too easy maybe. But it's ultimately not really relevant to the overall challenge of the game, and it's not very good gameplay, the interruption portions. Well, we're now almost in a position to make one of the 3 things you need to finish the game. I've got this portal base here. You build 3 things on the base to finish the game. Once I have 10,000 uranium, I'll be able to build 1. But I need to go out and do the missions in the other biomes, the acid biome and the volcano biome, to unlock the other resources to do the other 2. So maybe you can start to sense the pattern of the game here, the structure of the game. And I think if in this menu right here, it's differentiated more between areas that were missions or quests and areas that are just there so you can get resources and do base building on them, that would make that structure a little bit clearer as well. So I next went to the volcano area. The gimmick here is you take damage all the time unless you're standing on ice. Certain plants are generating ice, and the mission on this map is to scan 10 of them. This will ultimately allow me to make ice-creating buildings, so I can make a base wherever I like on some future volcano map that isn't this one. So this one's just here to look at and walk around. And in practical terms, it's to fight these things, because on my way to scan the 10 plants, I have to fight the bajillions of enemies spawning on the map at the same time. I actually died while fighting to get all of these plants, but as mentioned earlier, there's no consequence. You might think there would be a consequence on a map where you don't have a base, because normally you respawn in your base. It's implied that the base sort of rebuilds you after you teleport it back using some emergency system. But if you don't have a base, you just spawn like at the start of the mission again, but you keep all of your progress, so I just have to walk back to wherever I was and continue looking for the plants. Just no consequences. Really feels like there should be something, even on like the easy or normal difficulties. It shouldn't be no consequence whatsoever. Maybe you should have lives or something, or you should have to do something to make extra robot suits, so it's kind of like a commitment of resources to allow yourself to have extra lives. Something like that, I don't know. Well, after doing that objective, I decided to come back to the uranium base for some reason, perhaps hoping to speed up the process of getting the uranium after all. But while I'm here, it gets attacked and I have to deal with the fact that I've built against the edge of the map again, but the enemy can attack on the edge of the map. So we can't make full use of our long-range turrets because we're just shooting at the enemy as they spawn. You can also see though, I've put some random wall sections out there. This was a technique that I developed when I was playing Caesar 3, which is on this channel somewhere. When the enemy are attacking your base, if you have random elements of the base that are just out there, like not attached to the main base, the AI might get distracted by them and not actually attack your main base. That was the case in Caesar 3, where the incoming barbarian armies would stop to fight pointless sections of wall that you could cheaply rebuild and thus not fight the more expensive stuff nearby. That is also the case in the Riftbreaker, so here I am now extending this idea. Because once I got the 10,000 uranium, there's like a scripted attack where it's like, uh-oh, now you have to defend the outpost because you completed the objective. A big wave of attackers comes in. The thing about this was, your goal is to defend the outpost. But it's like, now why do I defend it at this stage? I've already done the thing that this base is for. This part of the quest would make more sense to be earlier in the quest line, because I've already got the 10,000 uranium. You never need any more than that. Like, we can delete this map now. So having to defend my base against the ultimate big final attack doesn't really do anything, I guess. It's kind of just here for show. Like, if you built a big cool base, it would be cool to have to use it for something, wouldn't it? Like here, we're going to have a dramatic final battle where the enemy aren't actually going to get towards our base at all because I'm doing this wall exploit. You can see they just sort of get stuck, they get clogged up, they choke point themselves on these little gaps, whereas your turrets have no trouble shooting over the top of all of these wall sections. And of course I'm now and again shooting nukes down these corridors to add to the damage as well. Also, your melee attack goes through your walls. So if there are walls everywhere, you can sort of sneak behind them. The walls prevent you from taking damage in melee, but it doesn't work the other way around. Same way that nuking your own feet doesn't damage you, but it does damage the enemy. Everything's in your favour in this game. So yes, this final battle was plenty explosive, plenty dramatic, but if I had lost everything, I don't think there would be any consequence. I would just go back to the headquarters and play the game exactly the same as I would if I win this battle. It feels like using the wave spawn system to try and create some sort of boss or quest event wasn't the right call. Although it's just fun to do, I guess. Like, that's probably the defense of it. It's just some enemies to kill. Like, let's celebrate completing the objective by blowing up a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I guess it's some gameplay, but feels like in terms of game design, it's not quite there. Well, we move on to the next thing to do. We've gone back to a different volcano map, and this time, while it is still a quest map that kind of pointlessly generates all of the resources and all of the map for you, you do use it more, because this time you have to build something. The quest is to cover a certain amount of the map with radar coverage, which is just the thing that unveils enemies on the minimap in the bottom right. So to build radars, I have to make little bases that will generate power to power those radars. Because of that, I am actually using the map and like making areas to defend. I thought maybe the enemy will attack these areas, so I'll wall them off and put stuff down, make mini bases with infrastructure. And this was a bit more fun. It felt like this time they were using the fact that this is a sandbox builder game to actually do something on the sandbox building maps for the quest. Once you have the radar coverage, unfortunately not much happens, and this is where I think it immediately falls down after I thought it was going in the right direction at first. It first makes you do the treasure hunt thing where you scan the ground until you've found 1 titanium, but then all this does is unlock the full titanium treasure hunt like we did with uranium, but that takes place on a different map, so we abandon this base. And what they didn't do is anything with this map like after starting, so they've got an idea for a challenge where it's like, the challenge will be, can we spread enough radar coverage over the map? But they need to add something that stops you doing it or challenges you to make a challenge. Like, there isn't actually any particular gameplay activity involved in making radar stations. You can do it whenever you want, so I don't know, it's just like, can you follow instructions? Can you do this arbitrarily easy thing? Yeah, I guess. We needed either a stage on which it would be difficult or require some thought to do that particular challenge, or it needs to react to you trying to do the challenge and try to stop you in some way. And of course, the easy thing they have in their arsenal is throw aliens at you, but it might be better if they could come up with something else. I don't know, like a challenge map where there's only one kind of alien, you can only build one kind of turret, and there's some sort of thing where you have to use the terrain to make it work out because it's too difficult otherwise, or something. Do you know what I mean? All of these little missions we're doing, they could be something entirely different to just a sort of very watered down version of the main game. And I think that would be better. And it does contribute to the game's main problem, which I'm going to get to in a second actually. But we did the treasure hunt thing. We found the titanium, got those maps deleted, so the volcano section is over for a bit because you have to research a thing to unlock the real volcano map where you're going to build your base and do the stuff. In the meantime, we're back at home blowing stuff up all over the place. I wanted to say that there's a slight possible criticism you could have of this flashy combat, because while I like it, you could say it's too flashy, like you can't really tell what's going on, and this could limit how skilled you can be at the game because you're just sort of looking at a mess of particle effects, you're not really reacting to any information coming out of that mess. This doesn't matter at all because the game isn't about your skill in gameplay, but perhaps it should be, or at least perhaps certain parts of it should be, to mix things up a bit. Because in theory, while the game has all this action gameplay, you don't have to participate in it. I could make enough turrets to make all of this automated. I just haven't done so. I guess I wanted to take part in the combat to some extent. It's nitpicky, but I feel there is something going on there. And the thing it contributes to, which is this overall problem, is that it does wear you down with the repetition. Like if the combat is only in the game because it's fun, it doesn't really serve any particular gameplay functions in terms of your main objective. If you just keep doing it, it's going to wear out its welcome. It needs to be part of something a little bit bigger, I think. Well, we'll talk about that in a sec. Here you can see I'm now on the official volcano map. And before I made my base, there was an enemy wave, but it was barely anything, so I'm guessing the waves are scaled roughly based on how much you've actually built on the map. So it's not going to be like, well, because you're late in the game and because you have a high-end mech with good equipment, we're still going to spawn a difficult wave against you and you just have to die. It just doesn't really send anything against you if you don't really have anything to defend with. Which I guess is okay, but again, it's like, well, why am I even here then? Like, all of these little combat challenges are still just distractions. They're not integrated enough, they're not challenging enough. Maybe that's also my angle here. Just because they were easy, I ended up thinking they were kind of pointless. And I probably wouldn't think that if they still gave you something. There was still some semblance of progress to be made by doing the combat encounters. They're more just distractions, and here's another example. Once I finished my base and mined all of the titanium I needed, it does the same thing as it did with uranium, where a big wave comes in to try and take your base, but you don't need it anyway, so I just wonder what would happen if instead of doing the objective I just left and just let them take the base. Like, who cares at this stage? I'm guessing it might game over you or something, or force you to win this little final battle as some sort of progress gateway. Well, it was easy enough, the turrets did most of the work, and we have now completed the volcano area. And there wasn't much to it. I'm not really commentating on this because it was just the same as the uranium area. You just build a base with loads of mines in it and mine the stuff, and then you can go. But you might as well leave your base there afterwards to mine some regular resources for you as well. We now have all of the titanium we need to make the second of the three things, and perhaps you can start to sense the pattern here. We're going to have to go through another cycle where we do like 2 or 3 go to a map and then leave style missions, and then another go to a map and build a base to mine a rare resource mission, fight a wave, come back here, and then we'll be at the end. And it was at this stage that the problem came up. The problem being that the game is boring by this stage because it's really easy, as I said, but perhaps more importantly, you're just doing the same thing over and over again, and there isn't really any gimmick or change up that comes from going to a different biome. They're kind of the same. Like, the ways in which they're different to the normal biome is that they're annoying. Like, in the lava biome, you have to make an ice generating machine before you make a building. This isn't a problem, like, you can just do it, but it's not really a fun thing to do either. It's not a fun problem to solve because it's trivially easy. And what it is in practice is a longer way of building the same thing you always build. Like, you're still just going to build a bunch of power plants and some turrets, but now there are a couple of extra clicks because you first build the thing that converts the floor to being the correct floor, which is an ongoing theme of what the gimmick turns out to be in this game. Like we saw earlier, there was the quicksand floor. Well, you just build the anti-quicksand floor on top of it, and then it's the same. So it's not really a gameplay element, it's just like this hurdle that's in the way, but you solve the hurdle by clicking an extra button in the usual process of building things, and then that's that. And the overall point is that, for me personally, by this point in the campaign, having done the 2 cycles of things and realised that that's what the game's doing and there's going to be a third one, I was like, I don't really want to do the third one, because while I skipped through it here, it takes a few hours to like go through those missions and make a new base and stuff, and because you know you'll succeed, it's so inevitable your success, and because really you're just sort of clicking on the same things over and over again to get that success, the game does wear out its welcome, as I said. And I do think that mixing things up and using the engine and the sandbox they've got here to make some more puzzly or challenging special stages to replace the things where it puts you in a sandbox stage but then asks you to just do something pointless would be a nice change of pace, like some custom maps you could even make using this game system, like a dungeon. Like there's so much combat in the game and there are healing items and special items to use, cooldown things. It's got everything from like a MOBA style game. You could have something where you go through a dungeon and fight bosses and you collect some items or something, and that's how you invent titanium, instead of walking around looking at the floor as you do for all of the other materials, which is just, I don't know, it's probably okay to do it 1 or 2 times, but it's not much of a gameplay thing. You can't be like, well, that was so good, let's make them do it 3 times on 3 different maps. Not really, and the same can be said of the combat overall. I think it is good, but there's so much of it, and it's so ultimately pointless that this causes it to wear out its welcome faster than perhaps it would if it was more integrated into the game, or if it was happening in more interesting contexts, if there was some challenge, like defend the thing challenge, I don't know, like hunt 5 of these things within a time limit or something, fight something that is immune to different kinds of damage to force you to do something a bit differently. Something like that, I don't know. I'm doing somebody else's job for them here, aren't I? I'm just here pointing at the game designers, being like, design more game stuff. Your programmers have provided you here with a lot of stuff to use to make a game, but really you just copy-pasted the same couple of activities over and over again. The player needs more activities to partake in, and the activities they already have need to be more relevant or more rewarding, and generally progress whatever the overall game is supposed to be a bit more. Again, more vague comments here, because I'm kind of looking for somebody else to solve this problem, and that is my overall comment. The game's not quite fun enough to sustain the total length of the campaign as it stands, I think. It was about 20 hours long, the entire thing. So maybe if it had come to an end about here, because I have already done everything in the game, I have seen everything the game has to offer. I just have to see it a bit more for it to tell me that I win, but it's not going to ask me to do anything I haven't already proven I can do before. There's nothing new to see. Really, the only new thing to see is that one of the maps we'll go to will be a different colour. But broadly speaking, we'll be doing the same kinds of things. And I think if they could shave it down a bit, maybe my complaints wouldn't apply here. If the game had been shorter, that would have been fine. But in an ideal world, we don't need to ask the game to be shorter, we'll ask it to be so fun that I wouldn't need to be asking for the game to be shorter. That's what we want to aim for, and perhaps some of the vague ideas I've been throwing out would be things going in that general direction. For now then, I'll just get on with grinding towards the 3rd cycle of finding a new resource, and come back to you later. Here I am walking around some place that is a different colour to the other places. We did it, boys. There is also an actual gimmick. Many of the enemies and lots of the plants on the floor have acidic effects, which can do damage, so not quite as significant as the volcano areas gimmick where you always take damage most of the time. Here it's less of the time, and it's less of a big deal because I have a mech build that has regenerating health. All of the damage over time things tended not to affect me much. Now your goal was to scan various plants, and these plants were surrounded by these acidic bulbs. These are the things that damage you were you to walk on them. But you can kill them, which solves the problem pretty neatly. And also, you can kill everything else that moves with reckless abandon, constantly holding down the trigger on my assault rifle, which I remember thinking looks a little bit like the design of the assault rifles in Starship Troopers, which possibly is a significant link, because this game's a bit like Starship Troopers in that you're killing bugs a lot of the time on some sort of alien planet. Now here are the things we need to clear out the way, and that's them out the way. Are some alien plants stopping you from getting to the thing you need to get to? Have you considered nuking them into oblivion? That solves all problems, as ever in this game. It was very satisfying as well to clear out massive areas of this plant with the nuke, so there's me doing it again. That was nice, wasn't it? In between nuking plants, we also do stop to nuke animals sometimes as well. And the good news is I have an infinite supply of additional nukes teleporting into my inventory, so I never have to stop doing this. At some point I moved on to the next stage, where this time you have to scan a particular plant, like a boss plant. And to do it you use a research station. I remember unlocking this right at the beginning of the game, and thinking the whole time, what do I research with the research station? A bit confusing because there is a research system in the game. You might think it's something to do with unlocking tech. But as far as I know, it's just for doing this one part in the game, where you research this one plant by putting the research station next to it, which will unlock the ability to do something or other, find palladium or whatever we're looking for. You can also see I've built loads of metal things on the floor. That was what the previous mission unlocked, the ability to build on acidic soil. As you research this thing, they actually do the game design option I was looking for earlier. They send waves to attack you before you've done the objective. Now we're talking. So like you actually are defending the objective and you need to defend it because you'll stop doing it if you lose. So this feels a bit more serious than the defend the mines that have already mined everything out missions that the game likes to throw at you as well. So we have to defend that little base, and it just means there's more significance to actually building a base here and using the tight terrain to defend these little choke points. All very nice. Felt like this played more to the game's strengths, but again, if they did this all the time, it would probably be too much. Like if every mission was build a thing and then defend it against some waves while something happens, that would get boring. But because it finally happened one time, after me wanting it to happen all those other times, I have to mention it. That was pretty good. Looks like our things are shooting at the plant we're trying to research. Luckily, it's invincible. They're firing at the little blobs that are spawning underneath it. Well, it doesn't matter. Now here's an interesting little note. I'm building iron mines here, despite the fact I've completed the objective, so we're about to delete this map. Why was that? Well, I wanted to offer this as a counterpoint to me earlier saying like, I'm really bored of all this, I just wanted it to be over. Because clearly I was planning on hanging around on this map. I was going to wait for that iron mine to do something. What was I going to do while it mined the iron? Blow stuff up. As noted earlier, I could actually make an outpost and just leave, and then it would automatically AFK the iron while I did something else. But I was still under the illusion that you shouldn't build an outpost unless you really need to, because it's better to let the maps get deleted than use up your finite supply of maps you're allowed to remember, which turns out to not be very finite in the end, but it doesn't matter. As you can see, I decided to blow up some plants, killed some enemies. I think I was just like looking for more satisfying nuclear explosions, but then here's me like clicking like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be doing something else. So I just stopped doing that and went to do the actual objective. So there are still glimmers of me using the combat system just for its own sake, just for fun. But yes, it still isn't really that well integrated into the game most of the time. The next thing to do is another treasure hunt mission where you scan the ground. This time the twist is that the things you're looking for are explosive. They're like explosive slugs or something, I can't remember. So, if you walk over them without scanning them, you take damage instead of getting the resources we're looking to pick up. And that's bad. So, well, the gameplay is the same, you just hold the spacebar and walk around picking these things up. Eventually you've picked up enough to complete the objective, and that will unlock the ability to detect palladium on the real map you have to build on for this biome. But once the mission's done, you can stick around and kill more things. This time there's a bit more purpose to it, because I'm looking to get the extra tech drop from this press space on the thing. I don't actually know what these little mini games are called in the game, so I'll just call them press space on the things. We have to get something out of this differently coloured rock thing, and the aliens are trying to stop me. Unfortunately, as said before, I have an unlimited supply of nukes, I have turrets I can put down, I have mines, I have, well, all sorts of things that I'm not using most of the weapons in the game. There are way more weapons and abilities than the ones I'm using. I just got set in my ways because this starter set initially worked so well that I never really changed it up very much. I'm still using like the initial abilities it gives you at the start of the game for the most part. And there we have it, we've cleared out the area. Looks like loads of flies were attacking me, that was something new, but managed not to die, and it wouldn't matter if I did die, that's the other point to bring up. We get the thing, it doesn't drop any interesting tech this time. Maybe I have them all already, who knows. It drops lots of resources. There are various kinds of resource that are optional, as in like nothing plot essential requires those resources, but you can make better equipment if you find them, and there are actually other maps you can go to find those extra rare resources. I didn't go there because you don't need them, essentially, and the things you build, if you do have those resources, they're just like making you more powerful, which is also not required. But I'm sure if I had gone and made mining bases in these other places to get those other, even more tangential resources, I would have been more annoyed at the repetition of the game. But that said, as I think I've mentioned, it is fun to make bases, at the very least because the UX for it is so good. Like, look at how quickly I just whipped out all that stuff right there. It's like painting your desires onto the map. You want a base? Within 5 seconds, you've got the base of your dreams. It just happens so quick and easily with the nice UI and the really generous way it lets you build so many things at the same time and so quickly, so you can really just storm up a base out of nothing. Looks like once again, as we prepare our base for the actual acid biome objective, we're getting attacked once again, and we have to very quickly set up some defenses. This was fun when the enemy attacks you and you don't have defenses and you quickly build things. That feels satisfying. But as we saw before, if you don't have very much, the enemy won't attack you with very much. So I don't really need all these walls and stuff. I could just go out there myself and kill these enemies in like 3 seconds and it would be over, which is what I did the last time this happened. This time, I walled myself off. Probably didn't need to, and that's probably a bad thing. Well anyway, we move on. We essentially make some palladium mines, and a bit later it's going to do the thing again, where once you have the amount you need, it makes you fight to defend the base, and I still don't really know what happens if you fail these or why it's here at all. It should probably do this when you have like 80% of what you need, or something. Interestingly, we can use the acid on this acid biome map to make power. You can bring the acid up with pumps, convert it to biogas, and then put it into a biogas reactor thing to make power without spamming millions of solar panels and wind turbines, which is what I normally do, although I was also doing that as evidenced right there. It's probably more space efficient to use the acid to do stuff, but I didn't actually check, nor did I need to check. We have more power than we need by a large margin. Looks like I'm still trying to put more down anyway. The big news is we're under attack, and of course I've already set up tons of stuff. This time I added loads of traps and minefields, which I hadn't really been using before. I decided to try them out, and I guess it works. It's very hard to know like what DPS you're getting from each element because it's just particle effects all over the place. There was this really nice choke point right here which I could have walled off to stop this attack entirely, but I guess I wasn't paying attention, or put some mines there. But we can shoot nukes into it at least. That's going to do something similar. I wanted to mention, by the way, a random idea I had to follow on from something I was saying earlier, where I was talking about the game having this kind of fake ecological theme, like, we're here to study these creatures, we can't harm them. Here I am, shooting a machine gun at these creatures while they're stuck in between a bunch of rocks and artillery is bombarding them. It's all in the name of research, and that's like the green stuff you see dropped on the floor. There's one beside my character just to the south. The research points you gain, as I mentioned earlier, they do something, but I never use them for what they do. They tell you the weaknesses of enemies if you go in the codex. I never opened the codex even once, so I really didn't make use of this research. But along the lines of making use of the research, there could have been some sort of alternate path through the game, I was thinking, or dreaming really, where you would come to understand the aliens enough that maybe you could communicate with them in some way, or come to appreciate their potential usefulness to you. Because the purpose of the game, like the grand narrative, is we're here to colonize this planet because Earth is in a terrible way. It's been destroyed, or it's too polluted, or something I've actually forgotten. But there could be a potential sort of friendship ending, where if you research the aliens enough, you come to realize that you could work with the aliens to restore Earth and not have to destroy their planet to move humanity over here. And there'd be a sort of good ending, like an ecological ending, where Earth comes back to life using all of the technology and the new creatures you've discovered by doing all of this stuff on this planet. And in turn, maybe you can help these aliens with whatever their problems are. You would come to learn them and be like, well, we have this ability to teleport metal around the place. You could use this to do something. And there's some sort of exchange between the two ecosystems of Earth and whatever this planet was called. And it leads to a real good ending that might be in line with what the main character kind of prefers in all of this. There's my new, like, spend twice as much making the game style game design comment. add a secret subversive counter-narrative where you actually work with the creatures and end up doing something better than what you were originally ordered to do, something like that. You know, has anybody seen Avatar? It's going to be a bit like that. I've got this brand new idea that nobody has ever used before, and perhaps they should have done that in the Riftbreaker. Oh my god, it's perfect, because the rift is the rift between your species and the species of this planet. So when I was like, well, you don't break any rifts in this game, the rift that you break is the rift between the planets, in that the planets come closer together and learn to live in harmony, no longer separated by this rift of being different species who just don't understand each other because they're so alien to each other, because your research brought us together, breaking that rift and reversing my rants about the title of this game being slightly misleading. Alright, they pretty much have to do this. Riftbreaker development team, 0 out of 10 until you do whatever it was I just said. So now I've done the 3 main things. We've got all the resources we need to do the thing the game was asking me to do. But it turns out you do need some more resources, as we'll see. But perhaps more importantly, we're getting severely blown up right now. Because after coming back, I'm guessing the difficulty of the alien waves is ramped up since we've done a story objective. And a wave comes in that suddenly just owns me up big time. This was a big surprise because so far we'd been fine against everything, like nothing had come close to getting inside or doing much damage at all. And now an alien wave came in that completely stomped not only my actual base, but even all of the fake base I'd put outside the base as a distraction. They're destroying everything right here. All we can really do is hold the trigger down on this machine gun, shooting into the big blob of particle effects, and somewhere we should be gradually killing the enemy. There should be a finite number of them in there, I guess. And also, as they fight their way through our base, they're going to be getting closer to the other base defenses that are facing north, which can turn round and start shooting into the base. Because of that, well, things aren't quite as bad as they look, he says, with absolutely everything blowing up all over the place. The big problem is the enemy have some kind of long-range artillery-style unit. You might notice big lumps keep falling down and exploding. They were probably pounding us while our turrets were dealing with things at close range, and hence we lost the turrets. But we got pretty lucky, I guess, here, because this base area is only kept in power, only kept connected to the power grid, by a building roughly in the middle. It's that pillar thing to my right there. And that tended to last for most of the fight. Like, it did go down in the end, but for most of the fight we had power in this area, meaning all of the secondary turrets defending the other directions were contributing to the fight. And we gradually clear out the main base, and then I go over to look at what this crowd of artillery aliens is up to. And yes, there are loads of giant snails and things over here causing issues. However, they're not issues that can't be solved by, say it with me now children, shooting a nuke at anything that moves. So we essentially dodge around that area nuking everything, and then that was done. But then comes the fun part. This was so satisfying. Our forward base here has been completely destroyed, but all you have to do is activate repair mode, click on where stuff was, and it puts it all back very neatly just as you had it before. So what you actually lose here is the resource cost of doing this rebuilding. But in many cases it's just a load of carbonium, and you can just get carbonium whenever you want realistically, so that's fine. Very quickly the base is operational again, although we have to wait for the power pylon to be rebuilt to actually get the power supply back and have all of the turrets work. We don't need them for now though. So something of a wake-up call there. We are no longer strong enough to hold off enemy waves, although maybe it also doesn't matter because we can just sort of somehow kill them and then put the base back. I eventually went over to the Rift Station to work out what we're supposed to be doing. While it's now fully built, to turn it on, we need a couple of extra things to pipe in. I've already got the water piped in, that was one thing. Adding this tank will allow us to store enough water beside the thing to turn it on, so that's that already done. You also needed 1 million spare power, which we happen to already have because I've already put batteries everywhere. And there's a meteor shower, so we're now going to have to spend some time walking around repairing everything in an annoying twist. But once that's done, I can work on getting the supercharged plasma. For this, I didn't know what it was. I'd never seen it in the game so far. At some point, I had unlocked a chain of buildings that allows you to produce supercharged plasma. I believe you can use it to make like fusion power plants and get more power that way. But yes, I was still just making wind farms everywhere and generally ignoring the many other options the game gives you for how to generate power. So we don't really need that. But now I can finally make the stuff that produces this plasma, because you need to store it. It's a liquid in these liquid tanks and then pipe it into the thing later on. Once we're ready to do that, we also have to make 4 magnetic stabilizers. This, like the research station from earlier, was something you unlock really early on, and I was just wondering what you did with it, because it was there in the build menu for the entire game for all intents and purposes. And then it turns out it's for this quest right at the end. You have to make 4 of them. The challenge being that they're pretty expensive, and I actually ran out of resources. I didn't have enough stuff stored to make 4 of them, so I had to wait around after this until I had the resources to actually do the objective, which was quite rare for this game. Normally I already had everything stored up because I was just overproducing everything just in case or for my own amusement. Well, we sorted that out. There was also something where they have to be not too close to each other, and I remember having to move them around to make it work, but eventually I have officially built the 4 things. And then it just says, well, you can turn it on when you're ready, but you know what the game's going to do with this. There's going to be some massive alien wave that comes in once you turn it on. So essentially it's time to prepare for the final battle. And for that, I needed a lot more resources, because I've got tons of stuff in my base. I could be upgrading, but I haven't, because I lack the resources to do so. So it's time to have various detours while I go and seek resources. One subtlety to note about resources that I didn't appreciate until quite late in the game is that essentially I shot myself in the foot by mining so many resources early on, because you have level 1, 2 and 3 mines, and each level, I thought, would just mine each thing faster. It actually mines it more efficiently, and quite a lot more efficiently. So I think, like, while a patch on the ground will say, like, this is 15,000 iron, if you put a level 1 mine on it, you'll get 15,000 iron. If you put a level 2 mine on it, you'll get, like, 30,000 iron. Like, it doubles the amount of stuff you get out of it. So by using up the resources with low-level mines early on, and just mining everything I could see as much as possible, that means I actually end up with fewer resources overall. And perhaps that is coming back to bite me now, because there aren't really resources I can easily mine in the headquarters sector, so we don't have everything we need to upgrade the headquarters sector ready for what is probably the final battle. But we shouldn't even really be talking about the final battle, because the normal battles that just happen all the time are already pretty difficult by the looks of things. They're starting to get pretty good at breaking in. I need to make this base even stronger to stop the enemy from taking it. What I could even do is remove this base entirely. This base is here because I was getting some resources here. This is the thing I was talking about before, where I'm making my headquarters weaker than it needs to be by having these outposts that are harder to defend than the main area. And the aliens tended to attack here because it was near their spawn points, as it turns out. So that's a shame. I could delete the entire thing, rebuild it on the interior of my base, which is mostly empty right now, and things would be a bit easier, but I didn't, and that's the end of that. So in order to become stronger in our main base, I need loads of resources, just like the basic resources. Right now I'm basically out of carbonium, the easy stuff to get. And I had an idea for how to get it, and it turns out to be easier than I thought actually. What I've done here is come back to that very first quest map where I essentially accidentally built an outpost, allowing me to come back here later, because I didn't understand the significance of making an outpost and I thought I was supposed to or something. So I can come back to this map where there aren't very many resources. This isn't really a you're supposed to build on it kind of map. But that doesn't matter anymore. I'm not necessarily here to mine resources. I'm here because I've unlocked in the tech tree the ability to generate resources using power. You have synthesizer buildings that can just make resources, but they have a huge power drain. The thing is, and this is the big thing that makes this much more effective than I thought it was going to be, when you're on these quest maps, you don't get attacked by the escalating waves of enemy invaders. So while I'm here, I actually don't need to wall off anything. I can just build anywhere on the map that I want. There are barely any enemies already here. The map's basically just free real estate right now. And because the desert maps get a bonus to power generation from solar panels, if I spam solar panels all over the place as seen here, and add loads of batteries as well because they won't work at night, I can also build loads of the carbon and iron synthesizer buildings, which will just generate an infinite amount of those resources in the background. And if I wait for those resources to be stockpiled while I'm in this map, the aliens can't attack, and they can't attack my HQ while I'm not there as well. Hence, there is a purpose, after all my ranting, to having those sandbox-style maps be there for the quests. You could also repurpose them later as exploit AFK places to sit, essentially. It's a nice place to go and just not have to play the game for a bit while you generate resources. Then you go back into one of the real quote-unquote maps to do the fights and upgrade your real bases. And here I am back on the cobalt mining base because I didn't have enough cobalt to make more synthesizers. The mines here have run out of things to mine, so I had to come back and just expand the base onto some new parts of the map. And this is a map where you do get attacked by waves. There's a little thing on your planetary sensor where it's like risk low or risk high, and I think what it means by that is in places where there are low risks you won't be attacked at all. High risk means you have to do the waves thing. And generally speaking, the maps where you need to make bases to mine things for quest purposes will have those waves coming in. So it's just handy then that I have this other base I can now make. The enemy aliens won't do anything about this, and I can gradually cover a massive area in stuff that generates infinite supplies of the other stuff I need for the other maps at, as far as I can tell, no risk whatsoever. I don't think there's any downside to doing this or any potential problem that could come from doing it. The only thing holding me back is I don't already have enough carbonium to very quickly build everything, so sometimes I would have to pause while building this factory to wait for the factory to make some more resources so I could keep making the factory. After a while, there's stuff everywhere as we can see, and our incomes are like 5 times higher than they used to be, and I don't think, as I said, there's any problem that's going to arise from doing this. I probably could have done this earlier, and well, it's sort of handy that I did this. It's handy that I essentially by accident set up that base right at the beginning, because it came in extremely useful. Like, if I didn't have some quest maps to go back to, I'd probably have to do that, but on a map where the enemy would attack over and over again, and it would be more of a problem to be wasting tons of space and requiring loads of map control to have this gigantic factory generating resources. That said, you might have seen on the minimap now and again, my headquarters is very hollow. Like, I didn't use the space I walled off because I kept thinking maybe I'll need it later, so I could have done that thing now on the headquarters map and probably got most of the same benefits. But still, it's more exploity to do it on the other map because it cancels the attacks on all of the real maps for one reason or another. And while I'm sort of complaining about this and being facetious about it, I still think it's good. Like, I wouldn't want you to have to teleport back to your base every time it was theoretically under attack and have to keep switching maps, because I feel like that would get annoying. But again, it also feels exploity for it to not happen. I don't know. It's a messy situation where probably having the maps actually be continuous or attached to each other in some way might be the answer, but obviously that's going to be impossible performance-wise. There's probably no easy way out of this situation. They've had to make some cuts and some simplifications to make it work, and I guess that's okay, but still worth pointing out that probably some of these weird little dissonances could be solved in some way, perhaps just not any sort of practical way. We're back home. It's time to upgrade absolutely everything. The enemy are attacking, and we've got plenty of resource income now to gradually make everything much stronger, such that those attacks won't matter anymore. Although it actually costs so much to get the final tier of upgrade on everything that I'm still running out of resources all the time, so I need to wait around. It would be good to go back to the other factory map and wait until I had tons of stuff to spend and then teleport back here. However, potentially I just wanted to play the game. Maybe I didn't mind standing around fighting enemies here, because you know what? That's something to do. You can click on the mouse, you can press keys on the keyboard. Maybe I actually wanted to be at the keyboard. Maybe I wasn't deliberately making an AFK setup. I've got a base that I could AFK at, but I'm not even doing it. And perhaps that indicates that the combat was, despite all of my complaints about it being kind of pointless, still fun and engaging enough that when given the option to not do it, I still decided to do it anyway, just for quote-unquote fun. And perhaps that is something working in the game's favour there. It's interesting, this concept of fun. I really have been trying to factor it in more to my assessments of games, both in these commentaries and while actually playing them. I always tend to see games as just like problems to be solved. I'm just here to solve problems in some way. I just want to fix things. I want the game to say, you did it. And I don't know, the process of doing it tends to not factor in so much to my assessment. So just coming in here to kill something for cathartic joy of some kind doesn't really occur to me as being a thing that the game should do. But it does do it, and I think it might actually be doing it correctly. I just can't tell because I'm too stressed or something. Like, I don't have the brain to actually appreciate things that are good. Back at it again with that commentary on whether a game is good from somebody who doesn't know what good means, which in some way probably means my commentary is very valuable. The Riftbreaker is a kind of game that really appeals to the unfun-seeking thing that I'm talking about, where it's all problem-solving, because, as I think I ranted about earlier, it's like a constant stream of really easy-to-solve problems that are constantly coming up. So you're always feeling like you're making progress and you're making things better, and you're calming your anxiety to some extent by getting rid of these problems constantly. And this stands opposed a little bit to like cathartic fun, where like you're supposed to be fighting the aliens because it's amusing, like, and I guess it is amusing to shoot nukes at stuff all the time, but I'm like, but this isn't solving a problem, guys. There's no engineering justification to be firing nukes at these giant like walking, talking snails and things like that. So maybe that's why I see it as like unimportant or not contributing to the game in as significant a way as I would like it to. But then other times I think, yeah, maybe it is fun to shoot a nuke at a snail. Like, maybe we don't really have to be doing this because it's solving a grand problem or it has to have a role in the grand narrative. Maybe just seeing the nuclear explosion is like, yes, neurons are firing in my brain. I'm having an experience right now. Back at it again with that commentary from somebody who is capable of having experiences in reaction to stimuli, which is probably the best kind of game design commentary you can get. Well, what am I doing here? Slapping bits of wall all over the place. I already talked earlier about my cheeky wall strategy. In preparation for the upcoming battle, I put random bits of wall everywhere to distract the enemy. We'll see how that goes. The main problem is, after all of my grandiose ranting about how clever I must be for being a true engineer who just wants to solve problems, I couldn't overcome the problem of how to activate the rift station. This thing keeps popping up saying hold space to activate the rift station, and in the top left it's like activate the rift station to power up the thing, and I'm like, okay. I've tried holding space, and I'm all out of ideas. Like, what else can I do? I tried hitting it and stuff and just walking around. Eventually, some guy's Let's Play on YouTube saves me, so shout out to that guy just there, because this guy knew how to do it. You had to click on the icon in between the little upgrade things you had to build earlier with the rare resources. After that, we are now in the final battle, so you just have to wait a certain amount of time and not die, and the portal to Earth will open, and this planet will be suitably ruined. In the meantime, let's blow up some stuff. And as hoped for, having random bits of wall all over the place helps out, but more to the point, having spent time and resources just making my base better helps out as well. I ended up not really having to be here. I was diving into the combat anyway, but I had more turrets than before, and better turrets, and thicker walls, and the little yellow dots you can see on the minimap. Those are minefields all over the place, so as the enemy get close, they're also getting blown up. I absolutely spammed the entire map in minefields, thinking, well, if the enemy gets inside my base from some like undefended corner, I want them to be stepping on mines the whole time they're walking through my base to the objective. So the interior of my base is heavily mined, more heavily mined than the exterior, in fact, so I was clearly very paranoid and expecting things to go wrong. But really, things went well, and it's one of these things where you can't judge like how powerful you need to be, because it's just saying you're going to face a threat, like prepare as much as you think you need to, but you have no basis to judge that preparation, so you just make loads of stuff. And I made quote-unquote too much stuff, because this final battle proved to be trivially easy. Like, as I said, I didn't really need to be here. The turrets were doing everything for me, and also, as you might have seen just then, where the enemy had the shortest route to attack the rift station, they were completely stuck on all of the walls I'd left outside, so that whole like wall maze spam thing completely works. The enemy just stop and start fighting the walls for quite a long time, which helps out in a timing-based challenge because they're just wasting time over here. And some of our longer range towers, like the artillery, can still shoot them while they're standing here hacking at the walls, so they are dying off as well. Add in me jumping into the mix, shooting nukes at them while they're all bunched up, stuck on terrain and stuck on my walls, and basically, we're fine. I felt almost disappointed because had the battle been harder, my preparations would have been more worthwhile. There were fortified parts of the base that never got to see combat in this final battle. The one thing you could do with this is have it so that the time limit isn't like until the end of the game. It's like survive at least this long, but the enemy keep coming, and like you get something else. Like there's a further reward for surviving as long as possible. There was a stage in StarCraft, I seem to recall, that did something like that. So it really tests all of your preparations to make sure they're useful. It's just that the actual gateway to completing the game could be lower, so people who didn't prepare that much or didn't really know what to do can still get through it. But I don't know, there are achievements or something, or points or rewards or unlocks for defending against tons more stuff as your big final base goes down in a heroic last stand. However, that doesn't happen. We easily defend the thing. As you saw there, the enemy actually stopped attacking towards the end, so it's not even an infinite supply of enemies during the time limit. It's just like a certain amount of enemies. If you kill them too quickly, you just stand around and wait for the game to end. Here is the game ending. It says that congratulations, now all of Earth's going to come through and colonize this place. They're going to survive there for centuries, and I think it mentions as well that they'd found some other planets to do this on also, so we can keep rift-breaking our way across the galaxy and blowing up planets along the way. So yes, unfortunately, we didn't get the subversive, never-before-seen, not from Avatar ending, where actually we could work with the local species to achieve something. Who knows? After being disappointed by the end not being hard enough, I was here checking out the difficulty levels, wondering like what else I could have got if I'd picked a higher difficulty. And this game does have all of these different options here. It's really good for letting you customize what exactly the game will be like in terms of its difficulty, so you can choose what you think would be fun to play with. And that gets millions of points in the off-ED grand theory of difficulty, which I forgot to apply at the beginning, which is when you're supposed to apply it. That means the game is good because it has good difficulty settings. So there you go, ignore everything I said earlier about the things that were bad about the game. Here is the other mode you can play, the survival mode, and this is maybe more like what I was looking for, where you're just surviving for as long as possible. Essentially, it's the very thing I was just suggesting the end of the campaign be like, but it's an actual game mode. So you get given a single map, you build a big base on it, and I guess the enemy will just keep attacking and it will get harder and harder until you stop, and I don't know, you have fun along the way. It's another catharsis versus engineering problem thing, where I'm like, okay, but why defend a survival base against wave after wave if nothing happens when you do it? Like, it doesn't matter how far I get through this survival challenge, does it? And then the other half, or the game developers, are saying, well, it's supposed to be fun, Devin. Like, you're supposed to do it because you like doing it, you know, like in a video game or something. And I'm like, no, this isn't a video game. This is an engineering exam. Therefore, I'm not allowed to have fun. Like, if I'm not going to receive a certificate of merit for getting to a certain stage in the survival mode, why would I ever play the survival mode? As perhaps evidenced by the only thing I did here in survival mode is run around until I got an achievement. I'd already seen there was an achievement for revealing the map without building a base. So I went into survival mode, revealed the map, and that was about that. And then I actually unexpectedly died towards the end, because I was here looking at the map, and there are sometimes invisible enemies that only show up when they're like in melee range of you. And such an invisible enemy had been following me around for a while and killed me while I was looking at the map screen. So there's my survival score. We survived a grand total of 0 waves, but we did get the achievement, and that's what we're all here for in the end. There's probably some kind of this so-called fun you could also have playing that alternate game mode, and I secretly suspect I would have preferred playing that to the actual campaign, because the campaign itself felt like it was spreading itself too thin. It didn't have enough content to justify its length, as I said before, and it felt like it wasn't making proper use of the game's combat system. Like, it has this quite deep and complex combat system that's really fast and frantic, and dare I say it, fun. But because the game, like what the game is asking you to do, isn't really about that, and so much of it is optional, and you can even use map teleporting exploits to skip pretty much all of the waves if you work carefully, and like never have to fight basically anything until the very end, or until the story objectives that occasionally make you fight a wave. It's just like, that feels like it could have been a deeper system if it was more part of the game. And how to do that, I think that's an open question. Maybe some kind of dungeon, some custom maps, some special challenges, some unique limiting challenges where you can only use certain things to do certain things, things like that. There are a million things that I think could be more interesting than the little quest-like missions the game gives you to work your way through the tech tree of unlocking resources. Or, I would say, just cut them down and have it so like instead of going to 3 volcano maps to unlock the real volcano map where you build your volcano base, just have there be one, and all of the stuff takes place on that map, or maybe you don't have to do one of the stages because they are trivially easy since you can't lose, you can't really die, since you just come back if you die and you keep doing the objective. You'll do them eventually, so to me they're less interesting challenges, those things, and you might as well cut them out. It would probably be fine. I don't think people would be complaining about their absence, because in their place would be the more interesting gameplay of making your base and facing the waves and doing stuff with your economy. Well, that's what I think anyway. Overall, the Riftbreaker was a decent game, I'd say. The whole time I was clearly thinking of things I thought I would like to be different, but it was good enough. And I did like firing a machine gun at all kinds of snails. I guess that was pretty good, even if the game wasn't about firing a machine gun at snails. Maybe it should. And maybe there should be a friendship ending where you ally with the snails, you attach a machine gun to them and become even more powerful as a result. I don't know, something like that. If the game hadn't been called the Riftbreaker, I probably never would have gone down that line of thought. So if you want to really avoid my rants, just call the game something really relevant to the gameplay. Just call it the Riftmaker, or make it a sequel to Avatar. These are the two options I'm giving you to move this game up from like your 7 or 8 out of 10 to your 9 or 10 out of 10. That's what it really needs. It seems that I might have actually had fun with the game, but probably would have had a little bit more fun in an alternate universe, so I've still got that tiny bit of leeway to complain anyway, and fill up 2 hours of the world's time with those complaints, and that's the most important thing. That is the real Riftbreaker. The rift between you and my complaints has been broken. My complaints have been teleported into your mind through the magic of science, and I hope you're really enjoying that. I am now colonizing your mind in order to ruin it, because my mind is so polluted and broken. I need somewhere else for these thoughts to go, so please make them at home in your mind. I'll have more thoughts to parasitically inject into your mind in whatever the next video is. I'm out of here.